Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to King's Place. That, confusingly, is King's without an apostrophe, unlike the station down the road, which has one.
Can I just say what the style guide shouldn't be, which is trying to get everyone to sound as if every story in the paper as if it was written by the same person. And that sometimes happens at some places. It's not true of the Telegraph, it's not true of the Guardian, I don't think. But we've occasionally employed sub-editors from certain rival publications, which I won't mention, but say in the region of Wapping. And you know, there's some good stuff in those papers, but if you read them, there's a tendency to it all as being so rewritten or edited by the subs that it tends to look as if one person wrote it. And agencies are absolutely terrible for this. The AP Style Guide, which is absolutely huge on the web, they've got 60,000 followers on Twitter, and it's terrible. And it all reduces everything to exactly the same. And you can't do that at the Guardian because you've got Marina Hyde. With her, we just stand back and like the blue touch paper when she writes Lost in Showbiz. We don't touch it because you couldn't. And then you've got people like Free Spirits, Martin Wainwright, a man who once got Wainwright as a verb into one of his own pieces. So the serious point is that we recognize when we edit stuff, we recognize that these are individual writers with their own talents and their own style. Can I just say, I'm not going to waffle on all night, but I've been reading the Telegraph Style Guide for comparison and in preparation for tonight, and I enjoyed it very much. I've spent a couple of days reading it, made a few notes, and I think it's interesting how when you read these books, a theme sort of emerges. For example, I now know how to address the Queen Mother, and that's covered 3 times in the Telegraph Style Guide.
In the introduction.
I now know that I must say lavatory and not toilet, which is also occurs 3 times in the book. And this I didn't know, and I'm certainly going to add this to our guide, is that Bumph, we share the same style on Bumph, B-U-M-F, not B-U-M-P-H, but according to the Telegraph Style Guide, it stands for bum fodder, and I didn't know this. If you were to read the Guardian style from the same perspective, you'd think, well, this is a man who's obsessed with really dodgy pop groups from the 1980s. So we have our own quirks.
In the age of sort of 24-hour websites and social media, is it possible still to keep control of all this?
Well, it's harder than it used to be.
It's very hard. I'm actually astonished at how few mistakes there are on both our websites. And I read your magnificent website quite a lot. Given the speed with which we have to react, there's one big problem that I think we have, and I think to an extent all newspapers have with their websites, which is that if a story breaks very fast, say from abroad, and the only story is from one of the American wires, it's bunged straight onto the web and it's all in American. When we had the French protests a couple of months ago, and they're running out of petrol in France, we published a story that said that people were standing in line on sidewalks with cans trying to get gas and all sorts of stuff, and our readers needed a translation. It's just a rare aberration, but that's the sort of thing that can happen. But I do endorse your point about the avoidance of uniformity. Again, like The Guardian, we have a number of very high-profile, rather noisy columnists, and it's very important that we don't suppress them. And I've always been against what I may rather rudely call the economist idea, that every article in the newspaper appears to be written by the same machine and is completely devoid of humanity. And all I am concerned with is that my writers are grammatically correct, that if they use a word, they're using it in its correct meaning and not to mean something it doesn't mean. And that if they do write about Her Late Majesty the Queen Mother, they address her properly, because the readers get very cross if they don't.
Simon does notes to the journalists, which occasionally get leaked to the Press Gazette and elsewhere. And here's one of them. I don't know quite when this appeared, but it was one of his notes to journalists. Homophones remain abundant and show up the right on the newspaper or website. We are quality media, and quality media do not make mistakes such as these. The luck of the draw, spelt D-R-A-W-E-R, through T-H-R-E-W, the kitchen sink, dragging their heels, H-E-A-L-S, and slammed on the brakes, B-R-E-A-K-S, all of which are cliches that might not be worthy of a piece of elegant writing, even if spelt correctly. We have also confused Britain, B-R-I-T-O-N, and Britain, A-I-N, hanger, G-E-R, and hanger, G-A-R, hordes, H-O-R-D-E-S, and hordes, H-O-A-R-D-S, principal, A-L, and principal, L-E, and in something of a pile-up, born, B-O-R-N, born, B-O-R-N-E, and born, B-O-U-R-N. If you're unsure of the meanings of any of these words, look them up before proceeding further. I just wondered, is that a little OTT? How do they respond to that?
Well, they know
occasional
well.
lectures.
They know me well. I think they love me. I don't know. I have good relations with my colleagues. I think it's important to use a certain amount of humour in both writing and receiving these things. I don't like getting all schoolmasterly with my colleagues, but you must remember that these things happen every month, and even someone with my legendary qualities of patience can get slightly exasperated.
They must comb your copy with great thorough looking for.
Well, they do, and even catachreses, if you like, and we all make mistakes, and it's terrible because I don't know whether you write, David, or whether you just produce, but I write 3 newspaper columns a week, and it is bloody terrifying because when I have written my columns, I go back and read them as every journalist ought to. I tell my journalists to do that. And then I put my head under a tap and go back and read it again because I'm so terrified of making a mistake. Luckily, the people who sub my columns are extremely good sub-editors.
I quite often send the thing through and then I read it. I need to release it before I can actually read it.
It's an element of danger, isn't it? That you might just be too late.
So often they get about a dozen emails from in the course of about half an hour. Sorry, just one other thing.
Can I just say I'm terribly disappointed that Simon's not a reader of my Mind Your Language blog, but it's at guardian.co.uk/mindyourlanguage.
I should read that. I don't really do blogs, I'm sorry. Adjectives generally are a crutch. I mean, I don't like adjectives. I go through my own copy trying to take adjectives out and trying to find nouns. I mean, I write about George Osborne saying that he was an idiotic Chancellor of the Exchequer, and I then realised I could just use the noun dolt to describe him, and it did the job with great economy and perfectly well, and so that works. And okay, that's in a column, not yet in a news story, but who knows? But I do think again it's important in news stories to say to reporters, keep adjectives out. If you must have an adjective in there, make sure it's one that is an objective one.
Now, where do we stand on split infinitives? Is it okay to wantonly split verbs?
I can't think of any case where a split infinitive is necessary. I've yet to see an example. Well, why not just say to go boldly?
Because
boldly
you allow split infinitives, don't you know?
Yes, there's no grammatical reason not to. And I disagree with Simon about this one. I think to boldly go where no man's gone before is an eloquent phrase that is diminished if you say to go boldly where no man's gone before. To me, it's...
What about boldly to go?
So we'll take a vote on that at the end. When are swear words acceptable, if ever?
I don't think they are acceptable, simply because people who don't like swearing children and elderly ladies read our newspaper, and I'm afraid if they saw very nasty words in the paper, they wouldn't like it, and we would be deluged with complaints. And again, it goes back to respecting your readers.
We have got a high swear word count.
It's very high. In the guide, we print the editor's guidelines, which is that you use these terms when it's essential, normally when you're quoting someone. I think that sometimes our writers and sub-editors don't always follow that, and we probably use more than are strictly necessary. But I would strongly defend our decision to print the actual words, and I think that it's rather strange that in this day and age you see newspapers that print dashes, or in the Telegraph's case, or asterisks in so many papers' case. They draw attention to it. People say to us, well, my child might read this. The child sits there trying to work out what word it is and then goes and asks his friends, what is this 7-letter word that starts with B? Bastard, bollocks.
I have a problem with the way the Guardian style book defeminises the language. So, for example, we use actor for a woman who acts. And this led to a very unfortunate obituary, which I think David remembers, in which a notably heterosexual film director was said to have an eye for young actors. And I thought ambiguity is the is the enemy of good style, isn't it? So how do we justify that?
Well, in that particular case, I think a little bit of common sense on behalf of the editors concerned would have been helpful. This is the issue that men write to me about quite a lot, and they tend to object to it. I don't get so many objections, or in fact any, from women, and particularly not from female actors. And this is a true story. I'd had a couple of glasses of champagne. I was feeling quite bold at an awards event at the Grosvenor House, and I buttonholed Dame Diana Rigg. I thought, let's settle this once and for all. So I said to her, what do you think about this? And she said, darling, we're all actors, which was straight out of central casting, and I took that as an endorsement of our policy. People always say at this point, well, what about Oscars? And of course we say Best Actress, Oscar, Best Actor, but I'm hopeful that the Academy will come round to my point of view at some point in the future.
Are you convinced?
No, I'm not. Yes, I mean, you could add authoress to the list of esses that don't exist any longer, and I suspect with authoress and poetess, it's because they were long and rather absurd words, but actor and actress are both 2 syllables, and actress is a word that has some currency. And we forbid the use of actor to describe a woman, because as far as we're concerned, it makes it absolutely clear, if there's any room for ambiguity in the way that you've just described, Stephen, that it's a person of the female gender.
Going forward, do the 2 of you think...
Hang on a minute, hang on.
...that you're fighting a losing battle? No, I'm being historical, I hope.
Well, I'm sure that there'll be many more editions, long after I'm pushing up the daisies, to use another cliche, of my style book and doubtless of your style book, because language does change. But no, all I'm trying to do, as I have said several times, is to set a standard for the writers on my newspaper that shows respect for the values and the character of our readers. And if those values and that character changes, then of course we will change with it. But I think that we're neither leading nor following. We are in concert with our readers about what we regard as being the correct way to write English.
There's a Twitter style guide, there's a Yahoo online guide, there's more of these guides than ever, and a lot of them are geared towards new technology. So I think that they will continue and in that way.
Thanks to David and to Simon and to the organisers for doing this. Thanks for coming. Thank you.